afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 8th webinar of the Meet the Makers Kaleidoscope Changing Patterns webinar series in collaboration with the Indonesian Heritage Society. In this webinar, we'll be featuring the Batak weaving tradition. And we thank you for making time to join us during this webinar. As is tradition in this collaboration, we usually ask our partner, the Heritage Society, to provide welcome remarks. And this afternoon, on behalf of the Heritage Society, we have with us Miss Elaine Chan. She is the Heritage Textiles Group co-chair, and she's also coordinated Heritage Society Museum conservation activities of the Textile Museum in Jakarta, and she's also a volunteer guide of the Museum Nasional Indonesia. So I give the floor to you, Elaine, for your welcome remarks.
Thanks, Chrissy. On behalf of the Indonesian Heritage Society, I would like to welcome all of you to today's Meet the Makers webinar. We're now in the 8th out of 10 webinars, and how quickly they've gone by. I'm not sure whether Chrissy feels the same, but they seem to have gone by very quickly for me. Today, we virtually head to the west of the country, to North Sumatra, after the past few weeks of looking east from Jakarta. And looking for the silver lining of these unprecedented times, how wonderful I think it has been for us to be able to see the featured artisans in their own environments, which we wouldn't have normally done otherwise. So today we get to go to Renny in Taruntung, near the majestic Lake Toba. I've also noticed that this webinar series has been attended by quite a few people from outside Indonesia, and it gives us great joy in being able to share with you the breadth, richness, and beauty of Indonesian culture, something that all of us at the Indonesian Heritage Society are all too aware of. A personal hello also to Sandra, our speaker, and Andi, our moderator, whom I have had the pleasure of coming across in our previous Heritage Society activities. I'll just mention that Sandra's book, Legacy in Cloth, is a well-treasured resource in our library. A warm welcome also to our other speaker, Renny. I'm really looking forward to hearing about your experiences. And with that, I hand you back to Chrissy.
Thank you very much, Elaine. So to begin our webinar this afternoon, I'd like to hand over the mic to Nia Fliam, who is one of the founders of Meet the Makers Indonesia, and a batik artist herself based in Yogyakarta. She will be providing some introductions about our webinar today.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you, everyone, for joining Meet the Makers Kaleidoscope Changing Patterns webinar series. Thank you to the Indonesian Heritage Society in joining us in this initiative to support the continuing traditions of Indonesian culture, particularly in the field of craft as art. The global pandemic has made annual fairs of Meet the Maker impossible for this year, and many artisans are struggling because of the impacts this has had on their craft. We hope that with these webinars, we can contribute to the lives and livelihood of our partner artisans by continuing to honor their work through these talks. Please know that 100% of your contribution will go directly to the artisans themselves. We hope you enjoy the webinar today. As we are making our way through the series of 10 webinars, we find we are still learning and making improvements for the next ones, so please bear with us.
So now to introduce our moderator. Our moderator this afternoon is Andi Haryadi. He is the Museum Services Manager of the Jakarta Textile Museum. He also has training and education in the field of arts, crafts art with the Faculty of Fine Arts from the Indonesian Institute of the Arts in Yogyakarta. And he has also had a lot of experience in exhibitions and activities in the museum field, the heritage field, and also in the sustainable tourism sector. So I turn you now over to Andi to be our moderator this afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Chrissy, and good afternoon to all the participants. of today's webinar. I'm Haryadi. I'm Services Manager of the Jakarta Textiles Museum. And I'm very glad and pleased to be a moderator of today's Kaleidoscope webinar series. And as you can tell by the flyer that today's we have the Renny Manurung and Sandra Niessen. Before that, Lake Toba is a crater lake in North Sumatra, which just this month received the UNESCO designation of Geopark. The area around this spectacular lake is home to the Batak people, of which there are several groups, each with its own language and traditions, including weaving traditions. The Batak backstrap loom and techniques are among the oldest in the archipelago. Alas, the tradition is now in sharp decline due to an unsupportive economic climate. Before we jump into the sessions, we will take a look at beautiful video that has been created by MG and Ashir that with us also in this webinar. MG and Ashir is a psychologist, filmmaker, writer, and poet. He is one of the founders of the Batang Heritage Society. He has made numerous films on Indonesian craft and art, most especially on Batak Ulos. He has helped the Meet the Makers so many times with photography and films. And for this, we are eternally grateful. Thank you very much for MG and Ashir. And now, before we jump into the session, uh, please take a look at this beautiful video.
The Toba Batak people of North Sumatra live around Lake Toba, a crater lake with UNESCO status as Geopark. Their weaving tradition, particularly the textile called ulos, made on backstrap loom, is one of the oldest weaving traditions in the Indonesian archipelago. But the tradition is now in sharp decline.
It became clear to me when I went back to Indonesia every time again, the Batak tradition of weaving is in decline. Kira 30 yang lalu, saya datang ke sini ke Hariamboho. Situ saya belajar tenun dari satu opusiho namanya. Segala macam membuat kain. Itu saya belajar dari opusiho. Dan saya bikin foto-foto. Saya datang ke sini, saya lihat bahwa ulos lama sudah mau habis di sini. Tengah dong halak be nama tong di sini. So, jadi saya pikir hasil pekerjaan saya jangan hanya ke museum di Barat, lebih baik juga sama orang Batak di sini. Sebab ini kan pusaka Batak, pusaka ulos. Ini budaya yang sudah tua hian. Ya, 4.000 tahun ini. Proyek saya sekarang, saya sedang kerjakan itu bernama Pulang Kampung. Saya mengagumi keindahan hasil karya dari nenek Anda. Buku ini Pak tentang ulos Batak.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Iyalah.
Sebab saya boleh taruh foto ini di dalam.
Iya, kami juga bilang terima kasih sama Ibu karena bisa kami melihat lagi 24 tahun yang lalu.
Lagi hidup info. Saya serahkan buku ini kepada Bapak.
Kemarin saya coba share ke mereka, kasih pemahaman lagi bagaimana kembali ke ulos-ulos lama tersebut. Kalau penenun yang lain terlalu banyak memodifikasi, akan hilang makna dari ulos tersebut. Filosofinya pasti hilang. Kebanyakan penenun di daerah kita itu lebih menenun permintaan pasar. Jadi mereka tidak lagi menenun yang konsepnya ulos klasik. Ini kan tadi Sumatra. Ini tadi Sumatra kan. Harus kembali ke sini.
Dan belum tidak sama
Nggak bisa, tidak bisa.
Jadi sana di mana putus?
Bukan diputus, ini kan berlanjut.
Oh loh.
Ya, dipakai lagi seperti ini.
Renny Manurung is a young, creative, and prize-winning Toba Batak weaver from the Silindung Valley. Since meeting anthropologist Sandra Niessen, who has documented the Batak weaving tradition for over 30 years, Renny has been reviving traditional designs.
Ini kemarin foto yang Nina Mur kirim, gini hasilnya, kira-kira gimana nomor?
Ya, saya melihat sangat rapi ini dan juga cantik.
Taruh dari sini aja Kak dulu, boleh kan? Bisa kan? Jadi nggak usah pakai pinggir lagi, langsung ini mah. Jadi kita repro yang lama kan?
She works with an excellent team of weavers and derives inspiration from Sandra's book, Legacy in Cloth, Batak Textiles of Indonesia.
Ini dari Sandra Niessen. Via chat beliau, dia mengirimkan foto-foto. Inilah Renny ulosmu yang dulu. Sandra bilang, ini asal usul bunga ros masuk ke daerah Sumatera. Ini bunga ros kelihatan ya? Ya, jadi namanya ulos sirara dan bunga ros nama simata. Kendala yang saya hadapi selama menenun atau merevitalisasi ulos itu, satu adalah ketika katanya sarjana pulang kampung menenun. Jadi tahun 2014 itu saya mengalami kesulitan ekonomi dari orang tua saya tentang menjual ulos tersebut karena motifnya sudah pasaran. Alhasil saya tahun 2014 kembali ke Tarutung. Bayangin 20-30 tahun ke depan hilang. Dan kalau kita generasi pemuda tidak lagi ikut melestarikan, siapa lagi?
Renny menunjukkan ada motif yang sebenarnya motif lama, tapi karena belum pernah saya bikin, motifnya kembali dibuat ulang. Dan karena kebetulan motif yang ditunjukkan ini sebenarnya tingkat pengerjaannya lumayan sulit juga. Waktu yang dibutuhkan lumayan lama, paling minim itu 3 minggu dan paling lamanya itu ada 1 bulan. Dari sisi ekonomis jauh lebih baik sekarang kita dibandingkan dengan dulu. Setelah kita ada ini diskusi dengan Renny, kita jadi lebih tahu dengan motif-motif ulos yang dari dulu.
She knows that the weaving tradition can only be maintained if the weavers receive sufficient support.
Wow, what a great video. It's very warm, touching, and it's very perfect to start the webinar of today's series. And without further ado, first session, we will have Sandra Niessen, a freelance consulting anthropologist based in the Netherlands, that will speak about her book entitled Legacy in Cloth, Batak Textiles of Indonesia, that was published in 2009. Renny Manurung, that a young generation that we see before in the video, our next speaker, is using this book as a source of inspiration for her revival work. Sandra will briefly mention the Pulang Kampung project during her talk. And together with Mas MJ Anashir, the filmmaker that made the movie film before, entitled Rangsani Tonun, about weaving techniques in the Silindung Valley. So, Sandra, you can start the presentation by now. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. I know most of you are in Indonesia, many old friends and many new friends. One of the big advantages of this corona pandemic is suddenly, through the webinar series, I'm able to participate even though I'm living in the Netherlands. So it's a pleasure to join you all. Thank you for joining us. A big thanks also to the Indonesian Heritage Society for coordinating this event. I'd also like especially to thank Mas Nashir for that wonderful film. He's sort of attached bits and pieces from our travels from the past 10 years, footage of Renny Manurung, and made a very nice film. Thank you very much. I'm going to go into my share screen here. There are many attempts to revitalize weaving, but this particular webinar is about Renny and myself. Renny Manurung, a Batak weaver, myself, an anthropologist. This is a picture from our very first meeting in 2018. I've documented the weaving culture, and Renny is using the results of my work to revive some pieces in the Batak weaving tradition that have disappeared. So a huge thank you to the organizers of this webinar series. I've already mentioned the Indonesian Heritage Society, and I'd also like to thank the Meet the Makers. I'm very, very proud of what they're doing with this webinar series. In the first place, because Batak weavers right now are in a lot of trouble. Their markets have disappeared. And that's not their fault. It's none of it their fault. And so the Meet the Makers has recognized this and is trying to do something about it. Weavers are cultural heroes. I think it's really important to remember that. They're not just technicians working on a loom. They don't just weave and copy designs. They invent their traditions and they grow their unique designs. They're the ones who made these unique traditions in the world that everybody is using in fashion and so on. Without them, the traditions will disappear. Traditions are not preserved in museums and books and films. They're preserved by doing, by being passed down. And a tradition that can't be put on hold because of a pandemic. Weaving has to fit into village life. Girls have to learn when they're still young. If we love the cloth, we have to admire the circumstances that generated this kind of cloth. It cannot emerge without those circumstances, village life. I've been very privileged to be able to devote half of my life to exploring the textile world of the Batak people. The more I learn, the more I'm amazed at the depth of knowledge and culture in this world. It is so much more than design and technique. I can't stress this enough. The traditions are expressions of human ingenuity, human capacity, human creativity, humankind, their cultural history, their identity, their meaning expressed in cloth. They're the result of skill. They're the result of local knowledge, social organization, and indigenous philosophy. Craft is so much more than just a source of income. And yet often by policymakers, it's regarded simply as a source of income or a draw for tourists. Textile traditions need to be rated by government so much more highly than they are now. They won't be there to be a tourist draw unless the conditions for supporting artists are improved. They're not expressions of culture, they are culture. And Meet the Makers, this group that's putting on this webinar series, tries to make visitors aware of this, and that's why I'm so grateful for your efforts. Meet the Makers is not just a market. Meet the Makers is a group of enthusiastic, idealistic people who are devoting their lives to explaining how precious cultural expressions are. Indonesian administrators are urgently needed to give structural support to craft makers and encourage recognition of the intrinsic value of ancient craft, not just economic value. In this short presentation, I'm going to offer you a short history of the Batak, of this legacy and cloth book that I made. My first visit to Indonesia, to Toba Batak, was in 1979-80. I was just 24 years old when I arrived. And I went to Haryadi. Can you see Haryadi there on the left underneath Siandro Mula? That's where I went to learn to weave. And this is my weaving teacher, Opu Nisisiho. She lived obviously in Haryadi. She was one of two weavers there at the time. And now there are no weavers left in Haryadi. And in fact, there's nobody left in Opu Sisiho's village. It has become a ghost village. Opu Sisiho taught me how to weave in Batak style. I was treated like a Batak girl coming to the Opung to learn how to weave. I'm better at pushing the pen than I am at pushing the weft, but it was the basis for everything that I subsequently did. What she taught me about technique was foundational for all my subsequent work. So if my work has any value, it's because of all that she taught me. In addition to exploring the weavings in North Sumatra, I visited 21 museums in Europe and North America. And I took photographs of all the Batak holdings, studied all the Batak holdings, and on the basis of that, compiled the compendium that is now Legacy in Cloth. And then I went back in 1986 to the village of Hutagalung. And here you see Opu Tiwut. She was one of my favorite weavers. We visited each other almost every day. She lived in Hutagalung as well, and she was tremendously knowledgeable. A lot of what's in my book is due to her. It's not my knowledge, it's her knowledge that I share. She taught me all about different designs and techniques, and also about her own family history. And all of that was before Renny was born. Renny was born 6 years later in site in Huta, which I had often visited because they're specialists in making the twined edging of the textiles. And then 23 years later, it took that long to finish the book, I finally held the launch in Amsterdam. Book was finished, and you see on the right-hand side a picture of the Karo and Toba and Simalungun dancers who provided the entertainment during my launch. Museums, archives, and libraries all asked for copies of my book. That's the norm. When you write a book and you utilize material from different organizations, they ask you for a copy of their book in return, of the book that you're writing. And so, of course, I complied. But it occurred to me that, in fact, it was the weavers who deserved the book more than anybody else, because they're the ones who gave me their knowledge freely, openly, generously. And I felt it was more important to acknowledge them than anybody else. I wanted to share with them, to honor their work, to thank them, and to encourage their pride. Because I know where there is no pride, there is no culture. Weavers have to feel proud about what they're doing to have the energy to continue. And so I created a project that I called Pulang Kampung, Back to the Villages, to bring copies of my book to the weavers. That was in the year 2011. What had started out as a book to help museums document their collections had become more important to share with readers. I saw so much decline in the art while I was writing the book. I spent 30 years writing the book. And in that time, I saw so many weaving areas just disappear. So I gave away books everywhere I could to people who had been depicted on the pages. So here a group of twiners in the Karo area, here a woman in Sigalahi who made the textile that she's pointing at in the book. In a Kadai, this is the grandson of Opunisisiho. Opunisisiho was deceased. And that's his daughter beside him, who had never seen a loom. So you see the tradition had disappeared in Arimbol. I think the great-granddaughter of Opunisisiho is joining us today in this webinar, Harna Malau, and I'm so pleased that she could join us. Here, this is in Moara. I'm giving it to a weaver and explaining the importance of the project as I saw it. Here again, the different generations, 3 generations in Opunisisiho's village. I felt responsibility as an anthropologist to give back what I had learned in the area. Here's in the farmer's field. This is in Sihotang. I gave this to a farmer because he was interested in the tradition. Afterwards, he passed it on to several other people, and now there's a young Batak designer who's making use of it. The tradition, the Pulang Kampung changed me. I no longer afterwards wanted to dedicate myself to my academic career. I wanted to dedicate myself to helping the weavers with their work. Mas Nashir joined me on that journey. I was introduced to him by Nia Fliam, and he did all the photography for that journey. And a year later, he and I made an exhibition of the textiles of all the weavers that we met, as well as all his pictures of the journey. And we put that exhibition up in the Erasmus House in Jakarta. The goal of the exhibition was again to share with city people how important the life of the weavers is, how important it is to protect the life in the villages, to encourage the life in the villages so that the weavers can continue their work. To tell the people about the importance of our Pulang Kampung journey. It was so amazing. In the exhibition, we displayed the textiles together with the pictures of all of these weavers that are depicted on the cover of this catalog. I'll show you the catalog. This is the catalog. And I've asked the Meet the Makers to provide each of you who are attending this seminar a copy in PDF form of that catalog so that you can experience the journey that we took. I'm giving it to you in the spirit of the Pulang Kampung journey. Since that exhibition in 2012, I've been continuing my energies. I've been investing my energies in activism. And here in Simalungun is Opu Elza. She's a wonderful weaver of the bulang. The number of weavers of bulang you can count on the fingers of one hand. Everything has been taken over by the ATBM, the semi-mechanical looms, and nobody's weaving these amazingly symbolic textiles anymore by hand. Her work is very beautiful. When Renny contacted me the very first time in 2016, it was during this phase of my life and my work, and I was so excited. I had struggled so hard in Simalungun to try to revive a tradition that was disappearing. And then suddenly, out of the blue, this beautiful weaver contacts me to say that she's doing the same thing in the Silindung Valley, and she's doing it so well. So I visited her in her home, and I believe that she is visiting us today from this same home. Dame Ulos is the name of her business. And that is where she showed me a beautiful, fine textile. You've seen it already in Mas Nashir's film. And she said, Sandra, I've derived this from your book. Well, you can't imagine what a great gift this was to me to see that a weaver had used the book, that it was being useful to the readers. Renny, I want to say you are a shining light. And I hope that you don't give up hope in these difficult times. The tradition is 4,000 years old. You are a shining light for the future of this tradition in Indonesia. All the power to you. We're there to support you. And thank you to Meet the Makers and Indonesian Heritage Society for supporting you. And now we'll hear the important part, what Renny is doing to continue this tradition and grow the tradition. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for giving such a blessing and interesting presentation. And how lucky in the museum library, we do have a copy of the legacy of the cloth. What a blessing. And of course, this will make us aware of one of the beautiful, priceless of Indonesian cultural heritage, which is ulos, that deserve. We will have the Renny Manurung, a young weaver from Silindung Valley of Banjarnahor in the province of North Tapanuli. Back in 2010, Renny was studying at ITMI, the International Institute of Technology Management in Medan. And in 2014, Renny decided to return back to her village to join her family and weaving team. It's around 20 people, and she built a kind of weaving group that Sandra mentioned before called Dami Ulos. In 2016, Renny found Sandra Niessen's profile on Facebook. They started to communicate and share many things about ulos. As a result, Renny and her team are reviving various ulos Batak from Sandra's book, Legacy in Cloth. Since before COVID-19, she has been dedicated to maintaining and developing their textile market. She knows that the tradition can only be maintained if the weavers receive sufficient support. So, Renny, if you're ready. Hi, Renny.
Ya, hai. Sardi.
Halo.
Halo.
Jauh-jauh dari itu ya, rumah ya. Oke, kalau sudah siap, boleh Renny silahkan dengan presentasinya. Waktu dan tempat dipersilahkan.
Baik, terima kasih Mas Ardi. Selamat sore semuanya. Terima kasih sudah menyempatkan
And good afternoon, and thank you for attending my presentation. I'd like to say thank you to Meet the Makers, especially Ibu Nia and Ms. Chrissy that have invited me to present. Thank you also to the Heritage Society that I have been given the opportunity to present today. And thank you for Ibu Bupati from Kabupaten Deri. Thank you for participating and joining us today. And thank you for all the support team of Meet the Makers, including Mas Nasir, who made the film for us today, and of course, Ibu Sandra, and our moderator, Mr. Andi. Today, we agreed to use this theme as the revitalizing the Batak weaving of North Sumatra. And I explain my inspiration and how I met Ibu Sandra, Miss Sandra. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm one of the younger weavers in Silindung Valley. Ulos is known as a customary cloth that we wear for ceremonies. And we know also that in the olden time, we use it for ceremonies, clothing, and that it has to be made by hand. But once the semi-mechanical loom or ATM was introduced to Batak society, and the art of printing, this has greatly influenced the culture and made our textile more commercial. And the production of our traditional textiles, our ulos, has declined. And this has also influenced our weavers not to want to make the traditional ulos and to just follow the modern market trends. And no longer turning back to look at the philosophy and understand the philosophy behind the ulos textile. But not only this, many people, Batak people like those of my age don't understand the philosophy and the stories behind these motifs. And the instruments and the loom, many don't know also. So what will happen if we don't save this now? What will happen in the future? What will happen to the traditional, original Batak ulos cloth in the future? And this is my fear, and this is one of the reasons why I've returned back to my village. In 2002, I was in school in a campus in the city of Medan, in North Sumatra. And I kept thinking, what should I do? What should I do? I didn't know what to do, but I said, what is important is that I return to my village. And many people said, why? Why do you have to go back to your village when you already have a bachelor's degree? All I knew is I wanted to increase the well-being of the people and the income of the people within my own village. People have told me, you have to meet Sandra Niessen. I started looking for her in the internet, and I saw her on Facebook, and I started chatting with her. I started communicating and telling her my stories. I want to weave these motifs, but don't know how. I've heard that you have documented these old traditional motifs, and I would like to learn from you, and I'd like to meet you. And finally, in 2018, we met in Tarutung, and the photo in below on the right is where we met in our house. This is one of my works that I have shown to her, and is one of the old techniques that not many people can do anymore. I had to study a lot, and I learned a lot and took a lot of notes from the book Legacy of Cloth. And it took a long time, many months, for me to finish this piece of cloth. These are ulos Batak cloths called ulos Ragidup Markonda, made by Opong, the grandmother of Sandro, of the Pasaribu clan. This is one of the kings of ulos Batak. There are 3 parts that you must weave, and this is one of them. And I will now invite Aunt Sandra, she calls her, to explain this in further detail. I feel that Renny knows this more than me, but I am I am happy to share more about it. So the traditional cloth on the right, I got this from a photo from the museum, Museum in Amsterdam. And here we saw that ulos ragi duk is, when I was in 1986, all of this ragi duk will also use the ikat technique. And it was inspired by this photo, and especially by the lines of this textile. This is one of the most extraordinary Batak cloths, where different principles of design within the Batak ulos techniques meet together in this cloth in one totality. And this is very important. Thank you very much, Renny. This is another motif of Batak ulos cloth that we don't find anymore, that I found it also in Sandra's book. This is grandmother of Tohap, Opung Tohap, wearing this ulos sirara na marsimata in the book of Sandra. I was confused how to make this cloth. I couldn't do it from just looking at the book. But Sandra did do some explanation in her book, and I tried to use this to try to weave this pattern, this motif again. On the left, I am trying to weave this pattern, and here I have a book where I've written about the pattern, and this become the basis for me to weave this this motif. And I have had to count the threads one by one, and to make the beads for this cloth is also quite difficult and complex. Maybe because of the complexity, that is the reason why this textile has become very rare. You will see here the motif of the rose flower. And this shows that this has come in about the time of the colonial period of the Dutch. And this was used for religious reasons, for the ritual ceremony, for to tie the hearts of a man and a woman for marriage. I took about 2 months to make this. Now I have made it again. And Sandra is saying that the work of Renny is even much more fine than the old ulos cloth that she had seen, 30 years ago. I have shown this cloth to the Bank of Indonesia, BI, and they have appreciated the expression of this motif that I have made, this cloth that I have made, and revitalizing it. For others to make this, it takes process, and it involves mathematics behind counting and calculating to arrive at this design. And this is a combination of beads and weaving and thread, and that's what makes it a challenge. And now natural dye isn't used. What is used is the glass beads and plastic. So this is the woman who is next to me now. and her name is Duma Tobing. 47 and not 49 years, I correct myself. So since she's already here, she can share a little bit about this. Hello, my name is Duma Tobing. I'm 47 years old, and I am a Batak Ulos weaver. Before I met Renny, I was making the kind of ulos that you find in the market, the market. But Renny was the one who told me that there are many kinds of techniques, especially the ulos sadum, and that we find this in the book Legacy of Cloth. And we were challenged to try to revitalize it. But with this book Legacy of Cloth, and I learned a lot. And there are many, many kinds of ulos that do no longer exist. But I started to learn, and I started to read. Through Renny's help, and finally, I also was able to meet Ibu Sandra. And I thank you to Renny that is able to introduce me to all these other cloths, Batak Ulos cloths and motifs. And also thank you to Ibu Sandra. And that I realized that through this book that our grandmothers and our ancestors have made so many different kinds of motifs that we can still revive. This is the work of my older sister Duma, and this is, you can see it in the middle photo here. And before she knew me and she knew Sandra, her condition of her economic condition was very, very difficult. And it's much better now. And this is one of my objectives of coming back to the village, is to help other weavers to raise their economic condition. At the end of last year, I was using some different kinds of plant materials like indigo and other plant materials to experiment with some natural dyes. There's still some colors that we are not able to produce, but we're still trying. In 2018, I was given the award from the governor of North Sumatra as a pioneering young person at for developing especially the youth. And I also received recognition from the Telcom as a second best exhibitor in the fashion category. This is what has happened in my village in Silindung Valley in the month of March when the virus came to our land. The weavers, majority of the weavers the majority of the people here are weavers, and we couldn't be productive. And this had a grave impact on our livelihood. And some even were eating salt with rice, no longer any kind of form of meat or other protein. So with our church, the GKPI, we were assisting the weavers, and we tried to raise money so that we can buy the Batak Ulos textile from these weavers so that they could have some income. And this inspired them to continue their weaving tradition. And many people were touched by this process. And more people were inspired to join this movement. This woman is weaving a certain kind of technique, and this is my team with me, and she is very happy to receive the sales for one of the cloths that she had made. These are those that are part of my team and those who have joined Damay Ulos. First one is Naimega Taheyan. She makes the motif Zugilia. She also has met Sandra and is very happy to be learning a lot from the legacy of cloth. Then we have Lisbeth Porusi Mamora. You can see her that she's really paying attention and trying to see what she can learn from this book. And this has become the basis of our learning to revitalize these cloths. Because some of these cloths don't exist, so this is the only way we can learn again. On the picture on the right, these are the pictures of myself and my older sisters. We are actually 4 sisters, and Renny is in the middle. And this is a photo of us weaving together side by side. The eldest, she lives in the city, but she still continues to weave. And we have agreed among us sisters that wherever we go and wherever we are, we will continue to weave. My other older sister, she works for the government, but she still continues to weave. On the right, on the bottom right, is a young weaver. She is not studying in school anymore because she's the backbone of her family to also raise income for her family. And she is the youngest in our team. This is information about me. If you want to reach me, my Facebook, my Instagram, email address. If you'd like to come visit me, you're also welcome. Or you want more information about Batak Ulos from our place. Thank you very much, and I apologize if there's anything wrong with anything that I have shared or said.
Beautiful and inspiring, yet relief for us that young generation do care about their heritage. I think 20 minutes of conversation and 40 minutes in total with Sandra's presentation is never enough, right? So now we come to the question and answer session. I'd like to have a question for all the participants.
Di Kabupaten Dairi, ini memang kami masih 1 tahun di sini, di Kabupaten Dairi, tapi saya mencoba untuk melihat bagaimana
see how these weavers are moving on. In Silalahi, we also have a unique kinds of textile, different from Samosir and Tapanuli Utara. We have 11 different kinds of our own unique characteristic of Silalahi Batak Ulos. And she's mentioning all the names of the different textiles. Star textile, the junjun, and all these different motifs that are characteristic of the Silalahi cloth. Many of the younger generation really don't want to weave. It becomes a concern of ours. For them, this isn't a prestigious profession to enter anymore. This is why we are trying also to introduce ulos into the field of eco-fashion. The older women are still weaving traditional ulos, just as Renny was saying. During this time of the virus, there is no more traditional customary rituals. During our district is trying to promote the natural dyes for cloth. So we don't use ulos to make our clothing, but we have a special cloth that we're promoting. So we are trying to find people like Renny from our area So Renny can also share maybe, and I hope that we can continue to keep in touch even after this webinar, because I want to learn a lot from you and your experience so that we can also discover a way towards eco-fashion and our plans of eco-fashion so that we can pull the attention and concern of the youth to come back to the village. Many are already in Jakarta, and these youth do not want to come back, but they can. They have the capacity to make this cloth. If we look at the village head's office, you don't see the profession of weaving as one profession in the area. You don't see the cloth. But many of these weavers have been able to send children to school with the sale of these cloths. This becomes a challenge as part of the local government of Deri of how we can defend and save our heritage. To Sandra, I have learned a lot from you, and I'm learning a lot.
Okay.
Welcome you to come to Silalahi.
Thank you,
Oke,
Ibu.
itu saja dari saya. Senang sekali Mas Ardi bisa bergabung. Saya belajar banyak dan mendapatkan inspirasi yang lebih banyak lagi.
Wow, what a wonderful. Terima kasih Ibu Romi for the thought and the question. And yeah, from Kit Gun, thank you very much for the question. It's from the chat box. I think this one for Sandra, because please explain the origin or history of ulos Batak weaving. Are there other types of archetypes in the Batak society? And what is the difference between the traditional ulos and the market ulos?
Those are two huge questions. Thank you very much. It's
baik, pertanyaan yang penting.
Piece together a history of ulos. In Legacy and Cloth, I looked at linguistic information data, and the parts of the Batak loom derive from early languages in the archipelago. And that's how we know that the parts of the Batak loom are some of the oldest in the archipelago. And that's where I came up with a figure of 4,000 years. That's from linguistic data. When it comes to the actual Batak tradition, not looms, I assumed, it is an assumption that I made from seeing how the tradition grows and develops, that the earliest textiles were probably the most simple. So simple stripes and indigo blue. And as a result of that, and also from what I heard on Samosir Island, looking as well at Sejarah Batak, the history of the Batak tribes, I assume that the oldest textiles are probably the blue ones from Samosir Island, including the suri-suri and the bolean, because they're just simple blue textiles with stripes. And also the sibolang, because you get the sibolang that are polos, the simple ones without stripes, without ikat. I assume they're the oldest ones. And then we see as weavers become skilled in their own techniques, they continually embellish more and more and more. So you have a sort of a basic cloth, and then the embellishments are what weavers add to it in time. So that's why I decided that the simple ones are probably the earliest. But nobody knows because we have no records from them. And the museum records only go back to the 19th century. And we can assume that the ulos tradition is much, much older. And in fact, I don't think we have, the ulos we have in museums are already from the time of decline, the end of the 19th century. The textile tradition was already in decline. So I think the most beautiful products of Batak have never been seen by people living alive today, except that Renny is going to revive them.
How about the motif itself, Sandra? Maybe there's a difference between the traditional one and then the market one?
It's not the motif so much, I think, as maybe the whole philosophy that goes into ulos.
Okay.
The
cloth
because
itself.
There were rules, there were the philosophy, the Batak philosophy implied a certain way of making a cloth. And with the modern education in schools, televisions, fashion, it becomes just playing with design. It doesn't have the embeddedness in culture anymore that it used to have. And that's what's being lost. Motifs can always be made. You see them, you replicate them. But what's being lost is the most complex technology. The technology that the Batak used 100 years ago was more complex than now. Many techniques have been lost.
Thank you, Sandra. And the next question is come from Bapak Sarmedi Purba. And maybe this for the both of you. Sandra, you said that market of ulos is gone. I never heard how much it would cost and why nobody would buy it. Mungkin Mbak Renny juga nanti boleh menjawab juga karena Sandra bilang kalau marketnya untuk ulos ini sudah tidak ada dan Pak Sarmedi belum pernah mendengarnya kenapa nggak ada orang yang membeli ulos lagi.
Baik, terima kasih banyak buat Pak Sarmal. Untuk ulos, ya saya rasa memang iya, karena tidak ada yang membeli lagi, makanya penenun di sini beralih membuat setelan sarung selendang untuk fashion, untuk kebutuhan ibu-ibu beradat. Itu yang ditenun di sini. Kalau di survei memang tidak ada lagi.
Ritual ceremonies. There are some that sell it, but not being sold directly to the local people. And when we entered this time of the virus, these people are also affected. They can't sell because they don't have a link to the internet. They don't have an access to mobile phones.
ATBM workshop owners started to make the bulang. And so they could sell it very cheap. And that meant that the weavers on the backstrap loom could no longer weave the textile because the cost of the yarn was higher than the price they would get from their textile. So they were forced to stop. And it was very traumatic for them. I've seen weavers crying, and the mere suggestion of learning to weave again or starting to weave again is too upsetting for them even to consider. And so in the Simalungun area, I had to deal with the trauma of the cessation of weaving in the year 2000. And a lot of weavers just couldn't bear to start again. And that's why it was so hard to revive the tradition in Simalungun. Weavers don't know where the excellent markets are. And I think that's something that's special about Renny, because Renny is Sarjana. She has university training. She was able to build a niche market, which has helped her develop her weaving in her area. But that was not the case in Simalungun. And so, that means that the owners of ATBM workshops are getting the money that weavers used to get. And this is what's so upsetting, because the money goes upwards. It doesn't come down to the people. It doesn't enter the villages anymore. The weavers have become laborers, buruh, and no longer independent artists.
Yep.
They were independent artists growing their own tradition, and now they become workers in a workshop that a man owns in a town, and that's the difference.
Yeah, it's some kind of unfair for the artisan that we call the weavers, like Renny and her family do, right?
Yeah, Renny has to modernize textiles to get a sale because the Batak textiles made by hand don't bring in good prices. People who work on those textiles are poor. So Renny is doing a juggling act. On the one hand, she's trying to revive textiles. On the other hand, she has to make them attractive to the modern market. So she's adapting all the time to get the market.
Yeah. All right. And the next question is come from Donna Loom. Who will the weavers want to reach with their textiles? Who is their current market and who will they want to reach ideally? Is it an issue of cultural interest within the local market? I think it's cohesive with the question from the Regina Lin. Sorry. Thank you both for great efforts for continuing the tradition. I'm wondering if Batak people still use ulos textiles in their daily life today, be it market or traditional style, for what purposes?
Oke. Terima kasih. Kalau untuk market ulus sekarang di sini itu hanya untuk kebutuhan adat sebenarnya, bukan untuk dipakai sehari-hari. Mungkin kalau dulu ulus pemakaiannya mungkin dipakai sehari-hari gitu. Kalau sekarang bukan hanya untuk kebutuhan adat saja.
Before, yes, we used to use it for everyday use, but now it's just for rituals and ceremonies. So some are used for certain rituals, like the 7th month, and when we do the ritual dance of the tortor. But there are many that don't use the traditional textile. Like behind Mas Ardi, there is a cloth that is also made by the semi-mechanized loom. This is very commercial, but many people think that this is a traditional style textile, but actually it's not. But many know this kind of textile. In Silindung, people would still know the difference and still wear some of the textiles for certain occasions, but not everywhere.
Modern Western clothing, as Renny said. And so there is no longer a market for indigenous clothing. And that was the first wave of decline of the ulos, because in the past, every Batak wore ulos every day, and every woman wore Western clothing. The money goes to the West, to the owners of factories, and the weavers lose out. So in a sense, Western clothing is a colonial construct. And I think about this a lot because I know right now Meet the Makers, excuse me, Meet the Makers is facing this problem. How do you support textile makers in the archipelago if you're in a dependency relationship with tourists or, rich people? Because if that's your market and there's an economic downturn, does this mean the end of craft? It's a big problem. What is the market? And I think one of the reasons that I did the Pulang Kampung journey as well was to invite people to think about the value of their own heritage. And when I handed out my book, for instance, to some women, older women who's being shocked, thinking, oh, we've lost something so beautiful. It was a real confrontation for them. It is a loss. It is a cultural loss. And how do you live in this world of a global economy that doesn't support craftspeople and still try to make it possible for craftspeople who love the work and love the products to be able to make a living. I think one place to start is to make sure that the ATBM, the mechanical, semi-mechanical looms don't for the weavers, and not all the advantages to the owners of workshops.
Okay. Once again from Donna Loom. Yeah. What I mean is, if the textiles are having a hard time finding their markets, what is the focus for trying to locate the buyers?
Kalau untuk pasarnya sulit, paling Renny punya kontak, punya daftar nama orang-orang calon pembeli yang paham tentang kain. Itu mungkin dari situ komunikasinya, atau mungkin Renny kalau dari online lebih menjelaskan detail filosofi mereka supaya mereka lebih paham.
Even though it is, are you also selling online or in the marketplace? For marketplace, I used to be in Shopee and Tokopedia, but I don't know why in these later days, I'm more active in the Facebook and Instagram, and this is more effective rather than being in the marketplace, especially in Instagram. I don't really know why, but it seems that if I post my things there, more people who appreciate my cloth, my work, and that there are people that want to buy some of the work from our area.
Still have any question? Please do write down in the chat box below, because we are end to this webinar series, and we will hear the closing remarks from Sandra Niessen. Sandra?
Well, yeah, lots of closing remarks, but already so many remarks given. First of all, my big thanks to Renny, especially for what she's doing. What an amazing woman. She's done her degree in university. She could get a job in any big company. And look at that, Pulang Kampung, the spirit of Pulang Kampung has entered her heart, and she believes in the ulos, and she's going to give it her best shot. And that fills me with a great deal of pride. I'm very thankful to her, and I really believe in her ability to negotiate the many worlds that she inhabits, the world of fashion and modernity, and at the same time the world of her heritage and craft. I'd also again like to stress the importance of the work that Meet the Makers is doing, and also thank the Indonesian Heritage Society for recognizing the importance of that. And hopefully with this community that is being built by Meet the Makers, we can find a jalan keluar, a way into the future that supports craft, because, you know, the world is changing right now. We recognize that the road we're on will lead to such severe environmental problems. We cannot continue the way we're doing. And the fashion industry has to change. It has to become sustainable. And I'm convinced that the work that Renny is doing will have a window of opportunity in time, if we can just hold on tight until the world becomes a better place for production.
Wow. Thank you, Sandra Niessen, for your time and for your knowledge, of course, because ulos is very precious to Indonesian heritage. And not but not least, Mbak Renny Manurung, ada yang mau disampaikan?
Okay, mungkin
have something that you want to share, just a little bit addition from me. When I heard the story that is made in other areas, For example, there's Batak motif made in Java, the island of Java, because they're using this semi-mechanized machine, and a lot of this is already sold in Jakarta, and people are claiming that these textiles are made in Tarutung, from my place, and that is affecting the people of my place and makes them lazy or unwilling to continue to weave with these developments. And we also feel that it's important that somehow the government can help us so that other areas do not take our own techniques and claim as their own, and also take our markets. Maybe one idea is to make some kind of association between buyers, between anthropologists, between government people, and between weavers like me. Can this be a way so that our cloth can speak again, can have the voice that it used to have, and this will have an amazing impact in our lives. And I thank you to Meet the Makers, to the Heritage Society, that have given me the opportunity to be able to present. And I feel there are many that have participated with my team, that have heard my story. And I wait for all of you to be able to visit me in my home.
Of heritage is not an easy thing to do, right? But the fate that brought Renny and Sandra together is a joy, because what is done by Sandra is continuous to the next generation, and it's thanks to Renny Manurung. Good luck for the Dameulas, and always keep it up. And once again, thank you very much, Sandra Niessen and Renny Manurung, of course, Meet the Makers and Indonesian Heritage Society, for addressing this very interesting topic. And to all the participants of today's webinar, thank you, and hopefully the presentation will give benefit for all of us.
Next is we started with our welcome remarks from Elaine from the Heritage Society. So please, Elaine, will you help us close this very interesting session?
Thank you, Chrissy. Of course, thank you to our speakers, Sandra and Renny. The challenges to keep this weaving heritage alive are indeed sobering, and for that we thank you for your passion that came across so strongly in both your presentations. I echo Mas Adi in saying what a joy it was to listen to the both of you. And whilst not all of us may have such levels of passion and fortitude for what you do, but I think at the very least the rest of us here can play a part as educated observers, supporters and consumers of this weaving heritage. And we are definitely that much more educated of the challenges and the idea of the cultural value of such textiles after this session. Thank you to everyone for attending. Don't forget to catch the last two Meet the Makers webinars of the series, and also do check out the Indonesian Heritage Society website and social media for what programs are on offer by the Society. Thank you, Mas Adi. Sampai ketemu lagi. Thank you, of course, to Meet the Makers. And with that, back to you, Chrissy.